Hello, dear friends. My name is John, I'm 78 years old, and I'm a privileged observer of this great adventure we call life. Throughout these almost 8 decades, I've had the opportunity to be many things. A dedicated merchant, a present father, and now a grandfather who delights in sharing his experiences. Each role I've played has brought me valuable lessons, which today, with a heart full of gratitude, I want to share with you. I'll start by telling you about a reflection that has occupied my thoughts, especially after turning 70, when time seems to run faster and makes us think more deeply about our journey. What do we really possess when we reach the end of the road? In my youth, I owned a small fabric store in the city centre. I worked tirelessly, often merging day with night, always with a fixed dream in mind, to transform that modest little shop into the largest and most important in the region. I dreamed of a mansion, luxury cars, and a robust bank account. And you know what? I managed to achieve much of what I aspired to. But it took a painful situation to make me see beyond appearances. My friend Joe, owner of the most traditional bakery in town, fell seriously ill. He was a materially accomplished man. He owned 3 houses in upscale neighborhoods, 2 latest model imported cars, and a bank account that would make many people envious. But there he was, lying in a hospital bed, and all that wealth could do nothing to ease his suffering or bring him a few more days of life. What truly mattered to Joe in those final moments? It was the innocent smile of his 5-year-old grandson, who came every day after school to tell him about his little adventures. It was the gentle touch of his wife's hands, who never left his bedside. It was the tight hug from his son, who traveled miles every week just to be by his side for a few hours. And health? That is our true wealth. My grandmother Betty, who lived to be 92, always repeated a phrase that at the time sounded like an exaggeration from old folks. "Son, your body is a sacred temple. Take care of it as if it were your most precious home." In my youth, I laughed at these words, thinking they were just exaggerated concerns of an elderly lady. Today, when I wake up ready to play tag with my grandchildren in the backyard, I fully understand the wisdom of those words. There's a story that Father Anthony tells in our parish that always makes me reflect. It's similar to the one about Buddha and the empty basket, but he tells it in a special way. He talks about a very rich businessman who, upon dying, got special permission from God to take a suitcase full of his most precious possessions to heaven. He spent months selecting his most valuable gold bars. When he finally arrived at the pearly gates, all proud with his suitcase, St. Peter opened it and asked intriguingly, "Why did you bring pavement from heaven?" That's how it is. What has so much value down here may mean absolutely nothing when we change our perspective. What do we really carry with us at the end of this journey? It's the stories we build, the smiles we share, the love we cultivate. My little granddaughter Sophie taught me this in such a simple way the other day. It was her 7th birthday, and I had bought the most modern tablet I could find. But do you know what she asked me when I arrived at her party? "Grandpa, save that gift for later. Now I just want you to tell me that story about when you were little and played with spinning tops in the street." About the true purpose of life, I had an unforgettable lesson at 45 during a business trip to San Diego. I met 2 fishermen who completely changed my view on success and happiness. The first, Mr. Mark, owned a small fleet of boats. He woke up at 3 in the morning, had several employees, lived stressed with bills and commitments. He always said, "When I have enough money to buy 5 more boats, then I'll be able to rest and enjoy life." The other fisherman, Old Joe, had only a simple little boat. He went out fishing before sunrise and returned in the mid-morning. The rest of the day? Oh, he dedicated it to playing his worn-out guitar on the beach, telling stories to anyone who wanted to listen, playing with his grandchildren who always showed up, and contemplating the sunset with his wife Mary. When I asked why he didn't try to expand his business, he looked at me with those serene eyes marked by the sun and sea and said, "What for, John? I already have my fresh fish every day, time for family, music in my heart, and this vast sea for free. What more could I want?" That conversation affected me so much that it completely changed the course of my life. At the time, my store was growing, and I was obsessed with the idea of opening branches in every city in the region. I returned home with different eyes. I decided to keep only the main store, but manage my time differently. I started having lunch at home every day, something I hadn't done in years. I began to participate in my children's school meetings, to play dominoes on Sundays with my neighborhood friends. I have a neighbor, Mr. Albert, who makes me think a lot about this. He has 3 rental houses in the city. It seems like a great achievement, doesn't it? But the truth is that he lives so busy managing these properties, solving problems with tenants, paying taxes, doing renovations, that he hardly has time to sit on his own porch and have a quiet coffee. The other day he confided in me, "John, sometimes I think I don't own these houses. They own me." This reminds me a lot of my father, Anthony, a man of little education but with a wisdom that only life teaches. He used to say, "My son, life is like a travel backpack. If you fill it too much, it gets too heavy to carry and you don't enjoy the journey." As the years passed, I came to understand that the true purpose of life is not in material achievements, but in the moments we live fully. It's in the long family breakfast on a Sunday, in the sincere smile of a grandchild learning to ride a bike, in a deep conversation with an old friend, in a sunset that we stop to admire. The 2 fundamental pillars for a truly fulfilling life are like the wings of a bird. We need both to fly. Let me explain better through some stories I've lived. The first pillar is health, and I learned about this in the most painful way through my cousin Richard's experience. He was one of those brilliant businessmen, owner of a chain of appliance stores. He worked 14 hours a day, had lunch in meetings, slept only 4 hours a night. When someone suggested he slow down, he would respond with his confident smile, "After I conquer the entire region's market, then I'll take care of my health." But you know how life is? It doesn't always wait for our plans. At 55, Richard had a massive heart attack during a business meeting. He left a prosperous company, but he also left 3 children who barely knew him. His wife Laura, after a period of mourning, ended up marrying Joseph, who curiously had been Richard's driver for years. Joseph was the opposite of Richard, a simple man, but with a natural wisdom about life. He always took care of his health as if it were his greatest treasure. He woke up early to walk, ate healthily, slept his 8 hours a night, and never failed to have his leisure time. Today, at 75, he still drives, dances country western with Laura on weekends, and is the most present grandfather Richard's grandchildren could have. That's why I always tell my grandchildren, the body is like a savings account. If you only withdraw and don't deposit anything, at some point the account will be empty. I myself, at 78, maintain a routine that many young people admire. I wake up at 6 a.m., take my walk in the city park, then tend to my organic garden. I have my chickens that give me fresh eggs every morning, and I still have energy left to play with my great-grandchildren. The second pillar is having a joyful heart, and in this, my neighbor Celeste was my great teacher. Living in a simple house down the street, she transformed that small space into a true paradise. Her garden, though small, was the most flowery on the street. Her kitchen, always with the smell of cake in the air, was a meeting point for people in the neighborhood, and the most impressive. She did all this with contagious joy, even having gone through so many difficulties in life. One day, curious about that constant joy, I asked what her secret was. Mrs. Celeste answered me with profound simplicity. "John, I learned not to fight with life. If it rains, I'm thankful for the blessing of water that makes my garden bloom. If the sun shines, I'm grateful for the warmth that dries my clothes. If someone is in a bad mood, I don't carry that energy inside me. Life is too short for us to carry weight that doesn't belong to us." This lesson completely changed my way of seeing things. When I learned not to stress over small setbacks, even my blood pressure improved. Now, when my great-grandson Peter spills juice on the sofa, instead of getting irritated, I turn the cleaning into an educational game. If the bus is late, I take the opportunity to observe people, exchange a few words with those who are also waiting, sometimes even make unexpected friendships. Loneliness, which many fear, also became my great teacher. When Mary, my companion of 52 years, passed away 3 years ago, I thought I wouldn't bear the emptiness. The first months were an immense challenge. The house seemed too big, the silence deafening. But you know what I discovered? That loneliness can be an opportunity for self-knowledge and growth. I created a routine that fills my days with meaning. In the morning, I have my coffee on the porch, observing the birds that already know my schedule and come to eat the little fruits I leave for them. I talk to my plants. They say they grow better that way, and I believe it. I started writing my memoirs in a notebook, something I always wanted to do but never had time for. Of course, I keep my social life active. Tuesday is sacred. I play cards with friends at the community center. Thursday I go to Mass and then stay for the prayer group. Sunday is lunch day with the kids. The house gets full, noisy with the smell of good food and children's laughter. But I've learned to value my moments of solitude as well. As I always say, loneliness is only bad when we don't know how to be good company for ourselves. I started crocheting at 75. The grandkids laughed at first, but now they compete over who's going to get the next tablecloth. I read a lot, especially poetry, which helps us see beauty in simple things. About serenity, I learned a valuable lesson the other day at the bank. The line was extremely long, the system had crashed, and the tension was palpable in the air. A lady was yelling at the security guard. A man in a suit was nervously tapping on the counter. Others were huffing with impatience. I remembered my father's words. "Son, agitated water doesn't reflect the sky." I sat quietly in a corner, took my rosary out of my pocket, and started praying, not just the prayers, but reflecting on life. Soon I noticed a young bank employee approaching, concerned, offering a glass of water and asking if I was okay. I smiled and said yes, that I was just taking the moment to say my prayers. You know, that changed the environment. Gradually, other people started to calm down. A gentleman struck up a conversation about football. A lady began showing photos of her grandchildren on her phone. The weight remained the same, but the atmosphere became lighter. This makes me think a lot about how we deal with problems. When my grandson Tommy is having a tantrum, common at 4 years old, instead of yelling or getting stressed, I sit in the rocking chair and start humming those old songs from my childhood. It's not long before he comes, curious, sits on my lap, and the storm naturally passes. Serenity is like a vaccine against the ills of the soul. The other day, I lost my bank card. Years ago, I would have panicked, called half the world, made a drama. Now, I took a deep breath, made some chamomile tea, and started looking methodically. The card appeared inside a book I was reading. I had used it as a bookmark. I developed a nighttime routine that helps me a lot. Before going to sleep, I take 3 deep breaths and thank for 3 good things that happened during the day. It can be something seemingly insignificant: the smell of breakfast, a surprise hug from a grandchild, a flower that bloomed in the garden, a phone call from an old friend. It's amazing how this simple exercise changes our perspective on life. As my mother used to say, life is like a river. There's no point in wanting it to run faster or slower. The secret is learning to swim at its pace. And she was right. When we accept that we can't control everything, paradoxically, we begin to have more control over our reactions and emotions. What has life really taught me after so many springs? That true wealth is in the things money can't buy. It's in the tight hug of a child, in the toothless smile of a grandchild, in the sincere good morning from a neighbor, in the bird that nests in our window. I created my own philosophy for each day. In the morning when I wake up, I'm grateful for another day. I've seen many people make plans for tomorrow and not make it there. During coffee, I savor each sip as if it were the first. Life is made of these small pleasures. At lunch, even if I'm alone, I set the table nicely, use that placemat I received as a gift, eat slowly, feeling the flavor of each forkful. One of the greatest lessons I learned was about forgiveness. I had an old feud with my brother Joseph over an inheritance. We went 15 years without speaking. When he had a stroke, I realized how much precious time I had lost. I didn't see my nephews grow up, didn't share family moments, all because of a piece of land that doesn't even exist anymore. About money and possessions, I learned that we need to have enough to live with dignity, but not so much that it enslaves us. I have a friend, Dr. Robert, a renowned physician who has 3 beach houses, but never has time to go to any of them. He lives running from shift to shift, lost his marriage due to lack of time, barely knows his children. What kind of wealth is that which robs us of life? One of the most important things I discovered is that it's never too late to start over. At 70, after I retired, I started taking painting classes at the neighborhood association. Everyone thought it was old man's foolishness. Today, my watercolors decorate my children's homes, and I've even sold some at the craft fair. And about love? That's a special chapter. After Mary passed away, I thought I would never feel love in my life again. But I discovered that love has many forms. It's in the affection I receive from Mrs. June, who insists on bringing me fresh bread every morning. It's in the dedication of Mr. Tony, who always shows up to fix something in my house without charging anything. It's in the little notes my granddaughter sticks on the fridge when she comes to visit. Reaching this point in life, I understand that each day is a precious gift. As that verse I like so much says, happiness is not having a perfect life. It's finding perfection in the small things of life. I learned that kindness is the most valuable currency that exists. It costs nothing and can change someone's day. A smile for the supermarket cashier, a sincere thank you to the bus driver, a word of encouragement for the young pizza delivery guy. These are small gestures that make all the difference. About wisdom, I discovered that it doesn't come automatically with age. I know people in their early 20s with impressive maturity and 80-year-olds who still act like spoiled children. True wisdom lies in learning from every experience, whether good or bad. One of the most difficult lessons, but also the most important, was learning to accept changes. The world I knew in my youth no longer exists. Instead of complaining about novelties, I decided to embrace them. I asked my grandson for help to learn how to use a smartphone. Today I make video calls with distant friends, read news online, and even participate in a senior citizens WhatsApp group. About legacy, I understood that what we leave behind are not material things, but the impact we had on people's lives. The stories I told my grandchildren, the values I passed on to my children, the example I set for my neighbors, this is what really matters in the end. And finally, the most precious lesson, love. Not just romantic love, but love in all its forms. Love for life, for nature, for friends, for family, for oneself. I discovered that the more love we give, the more we receive in return. It's like an inexhaustible source that renews itself with each gesture of affection. So, my dear ones, if I could sum up everything I've learned in these 78 years in one sentence, it would be this. Live each day as if it were your last, but plant trees as if you were going to live forever. Appreciate the present moment, but also leave a positive legacy for future generations. I hope these stories and reflections from an old man who has seen a lot can help you find more joy, peace, and purpose in your own journeys. Always remember, life is like a cup of coffee. It's better to savor it slowly, feeling each sip, enjoying every moment. It has been an immense joy to be able to share a little bit of my experience with you. May God bless each of your paths, and may you find the same happiness and serenity that I have been fortunate to discover throughout this incredible adventure called life. With all the love in the world, John.